Welcome to this first class on anatomy. So, anatomy is probably one of the most difficult things to master when it comes to art. There's just so much there to learn. There's so much theory, so much knowledge you need, so much practice involved to be able to do it properly, to draw anatomy, to draw figures with proper anatomy. So this is going to really challenge all that we've seen so far and then push us even more. This is something that's very important to know. It's very important to get really good at this because this will impact pretty much everything that comes after this. So when it comes to concepting characters, when it comes to concepting creatures, all sorts of things, whenever there's a character involved, whenever something is alive that you need to draw, anatomy will be involved. And even, if you're going to draw statues or things like that. So anatomy is everywhere, and it is going to be a really, really big class, a really important class. Now, this first class is going to cover the head. So the head is one of the most important thing in the human body. It's the focal point most of the time. It's the one thing, the first thing that everybody's going to look at. When you look at someone for the first time, you don't look at their feet, you look at their eyes directly in their face. So this is going to be focused on the head, and then the other classes are going to focus on the rest of the body. But the head really deserves its own class because there's just so much there to unpack. But before we get to the head and before we get to everything else when it comes to anatomy, there are certainly things that you need to already not necessarily master, but that you need to be really comfortable with before you attempt anything else. And this would be it. So there are essentially three exercises that I highly recommend that you practice on a daily basis, that you practice, bring a sketchbook or something, and when you're at the restaurant, when you're waiting for something, just start sketching. It doesn't require much creativity at all. It's just one of those things that you can do when you're daydreaming, and it really, really, really helps build that foundation so that you can eventually be able to draw anatomy really, really well. If you can't do these three things, if you can't do these exercises, then there's no way that you'll be able to draw anatomy. There's no way that you'll be able to draw people properly. So this is really the first step. You need to be good at this. And those three things are being able to draw volumes in perspective. So this is the very, very first one, and as you can see here, it increases in difficulty as we move on. So the first one, volumes in perspective, this is essentially the simplest one to do. It includes the cylinder that you've been practicing for the figure drawing class. It includes different cubes, different cylinders, spheres, all the things that we've seen in the perspective class. So it's really important that you get really good at this. This is kind of like the basic building blocks for everything else. The next step will be taking all those volumes and bending them, twisting them, and deforming them in space. So this is going to be a lot more challenging, but these things here, like these little snake-looking things, or just taking really long boxes and twisting them in different angles and twisting them in different directions. This is really going to be at the core of drawing anatomy, because as we know, even though the body can be deconstructed into very simple volumes, those volumes will not, most of the time, will not just stay just stiff in their basic form. They will deform a little bit. Imagine the torso as a big cylinder. That torso is going to bend in all directions. So it's very important that we're able to do this on super simple shapes before we can actually apply this knowledge, apply these skills to actually deforming muscles and deforming shapes and volumes that are obviously more complicated. And then finally, the last thing that we really need to practice is those connections. So what happens when those volumes are actually connect, when they touch, when they interact with one another? As you probably know, all the different all the different bones, all the different muscles in the body all interact with one another. They all overlap. They're all connected, and this is really what this is going to practice here. So we need to be able to attach those shapes to one another to be able to properly represent anatomy in space. And not only is it important to really get good at those connections, but having the ability to draw those connections in different perspectives as well is going to be essential to us being able to draw anatomy properly. And the things at the bottom here in red, those are going to be kind of extra challenges for those exercises. So first things, you can draw volumes in perspective, fairly simple. And next, what you can do is try to overlap them. So like I've done here, so we have the cylinder here that's above, that's in front of the cube back here. Then we have this other cylinder that's in front. So having them overlap this way, it will really situate them in space, and it's also a little bit harder to do. So I would highly recommend that you try to do this once you're comfortable drawing the volumes on their own. And then next level of difficulty would be to add basic shading to your shapes, to your volumes. So this means it can be very simple. So like I have an example here, this simple sphere with very, very simple shading, and try to do the same for all those other shapes. So don't try to imagine like complicated light setups or anything like that. Just kind of diffuse, simple shading on your volume so that it gives them a little bit more of a three-dimensional feel to them. And then the next step, and kind of like the last added difficulty that you could practice, would be to add interactive shading. So this means that having different shapes interacting with each other, and then making sure that the shadows or that the shading works for those shapes. So let's say we have here this little deformed rectangle, and this thing is casting a little bit of shadow on here, is casting shadow on the side of the box here. So you can try to start imagining very simple light setup, maybe just one light in there, a subtle light, maybe like the light of the sun, and then try to imagine how this behaves on those simple shapes. And once again, this is going to be key in drawing and shading anatomy properly when we introduce all the muscles. So there we go. Those are all the kind of requirements that would be needed for this anatomy class. Of course, very important also that you take a look at the perspective class 1 and 2, that you take a look at the Photoshop class to get more familiar with shading, especially in the digital format. Use these exercises to reinforce all that you've learned so far. I know this might seem a little bit much to start the class with, but again, this is all stuff that I wouldn't really recommend that you just sit down at your computer and just start working on. This is not really rewarding to do this kind of stuff, so this is really more something that you would do if you're on the go, or having dinner and you have like a napkin that you can draw on. Something to keep you occupied, something to just scribble on. Those are kind of like the perfect moments to practice these more boring exercises. This is going to really add up over time, and this is, as I said, a very, very important skills to practice. There's one more thing here that I haven't included, but it is the thickness of your lines. So the thinner your lines, the more accurate you'll have to be. And this is really a thing that I've noticed with people that are starting. They tend to have lines that are really, really wide. And this is kind of a way to make things a little bit easier because having thicker lines means that you don't have to put as much detail in. And by forcing yourself to work with really, really thin lines for those shapes, those complicated shapes and deformations, it really forces you to be precise. So just try to be aware of the thickness of your lines when you're drawing. If you're just starting, don't worry about it. Just try to draw those shapes, and that's going to be really, really good already. But as you practice, as you get better and better, try to reduce the thickness of your lines. Try to use lines that are thinner, that are more subtle, more refined, and you'll see that it gets harder and harder the thinner the line is, because, as I've said, everything has to be more precise, everything has to be cleaner. So definitely something that's really good to practice, really good to keep in mind as you're working on all those exercises. But now that this is out of the way, let's get started and dive right into how to draw the human head. Drawing the human head is probably one of the most challenging things any artist will ever have to do. But that being said, there are a number of things that we can practice and that we can do to approach it in a way that makes things a lot simpler. So the first thing that I think is very important to be able to master is going to be the shape of the head, the general volumes that the head has. And once we know this, like everything else, we're trying to deconstruct essentially a really complicated part of the body into something that's very simple, so that from there we can move it in perspective, we can move it in space, and then be able to add on top of that the features that we've removed by simplifying it in the first place. So there's a couple things here, but the first thing will be we need to be good at drawing circles. So that seems silly, but it's going to be one of the first thing that we need to really be able to do to be able to draw proper heads. So not only circles, but ovals as well. So the main shape of the head is going to be a ball. So that's always the way we're going to start. We don't start with a square, we don't start with a cone, we always start with a ball. It's the simplest, one of the simplest shapes that we can create, but to draw it freehand, it's a little bit complicated, a little bit tricky. You know, if you're really struggling with drawing spheres, is try to have the same distance, you know, horizontally and vertically. You know, this is not going to cut it, you know, that's not good either. We don't want an oval, we want something that's circular. Of course, with Photoshop, you can always go ahead and create an ellipse and hold Shift to draw a perfect circle, and then go in edit mode, stroke, and then, you know, decide of the width in pixels and the color, and then hit OK. So this is one way to do it. But I would highly recommend that you just practice drawing spheres like this. When you draw a sphere, use your elbow, don't use your wrist. It's a lot easier to move the entire arm than it is to move your wrist, and you'll get better results this way. There we go. So this is going to be the first thing that you'll ever put down on paper when it comes to time to draw a head. Another part for the jaw. And then the jaw is going to be kind of a complex box, and it will look something like this. So this is going to be kind of the box that we add on, that we attach to the sphere. So I'll explain how to build this later, but essentially those are the two pieces that we'll be working with. But the first thing that we have right here is a sphere, and then what we'll want to do is we'll want to chop the sides as if it was, you know, as if this is an orange, and you cut the sides like this, so that you're only left with kind of like the center portion, like this. And you can imagine this would be the nose right here, right? Okay, so we're chopping the sides of the head. So to do this, we're going to draw a big oval like this, so something like that. So it's going to be centered in the sphere, and also it's going to be at a particular size in comparison to the entire sphere, and that size is going to be 2/3 of the entire head. So let's say we have thirds like this, 1/3, another third. If we take this distance here, so those 2/3 right here, this is going to be the size of this oval that we just drew. So this would be it. So maybe this one's a little bit too small. So you want to make sure that this is exactly 2/3 of the full height of this sphere. And then, of course, on the other side, we wouldn't be able to see it in this case because it would be kind of hidden on the other side of the sphere. So much like the body, the head can be split in different and easy to remember ratios. And this is going to be the first exercise that you have to practice. So it's going to be not only this one, but also we're going to split the sphere in half, right down the center. So this is going to be the line, the symmetry line for our face. So that would be something like this. And the line that I'm using right now, and you can actually start with this line if this is easier for you for some reason. So you can start with a symmetry line, the one that cuts the sphere right down the center, and then you can use that line as a guide to draw the ovals on the side. And something that you can look at right now is that the direction of this curve here is going to be very similar to this one. It's actually going to be parallel to this one. So if we were to look at it from the top here, it's parallel like this. Well, it's not actually parallel, but for the sake of simplicity, right now for the first step, let's consider that it is, because in reality, if we look at a head from the top view, it's going to actually be like this instead. So This is a little bit exaggerated, but you have the nose right here and the eyes, and a real head is going to have this shape instead. It's not going to be like this one where all those sides are parallel. But for now, let's not worry about that. Let's practice drawing this here, and if for most angles this is actually going to work quite well. It's only when we look at a face from the top, a head from the top or from the front, that we will want to take these angles here in consideration. So for now, this is going to be the first exercise, like I said. So we want to practice doing this hundreds of times. We need to get really, really good at drawing this. So once we have that, there's one more line that we want to add in here to really understand where this head is looking. So in what direction the head is looking, and it's going to be a horizontal line, and this is going to represent the eyebrows. So we can do a diagonal in here. So this, depending on how we slice it, is going to change the orientation of the head as a whole. So instead, if we have it like this, then the head is going to look up, or seem like it's looking up. If it's completely straight, then it'll seem like the head is just looking like straight ahead. Or we can have even angles that are really, really intense, like this. And now it'll seem like the head is looking down. So when you have the circle here on the side, you just draw a diagonal. And from there, you continue that line, but now it's on the surface of the sphere, so the front of the sphere. So we'll want to have a slight curve to it, but it would be something like this. And then you would have your eyes right here below. So this is the thing that you really need to practice, and then this is going to make everything else a lot simpler afterwards. So depending on how round these are. So let's say, if you look at it from the front, then maybe they'll be really, really narrow in this case. So the sphere, the oval right here, will appear to be really, really narrow, as opposed to somebody that might be looking sideways, where it'll appear much more round. So maybe something like this instead. You can imagine here, this would be the eyebrows right here. And then you would have the nose. So in this case, the head is looking sideways. In this case, the head is looking kind of up. And in this case, maybe the head is looking down. So again, this is a really important exercise. Try to always, a couple things to look for when doing this. Make sure that the size of the oval on the side is correct. Make sure that it's 2/3 of the total height of the sphere. Also make sure that it is round, that it follows the curve of the rest of the sphere. So, if you have a sphere that's like this, and you have the line, the symmetry line in the center, separating the sphere like this, for example, you don't want those ovals to be like this. That wouldn't be right. It's not, the distance here is too different. Instead, you want something that's very similar, where the lines are parallel, where the distance here is always the same. Okay, now let's say we've practiced this and we're really, really, really good. Now we can move on to the next step, and this is going to figure out where the jaw is. So we are going to add a couple more guides in here. So I'm going to draw a parallel line to this one right here. So depending on the angle of this one, the direction of the line is going to change. So if it's this line right here, then it will be this one right there. If it's this one right here, then it will be this one right there. What's important to note here with this line is that it must touch the bottom of this oval. So it will be like this. So something like this. So this one will be good. And so what we are doing this for is to find this distance here. So we want to find the distance of the half the oval. So the diameter of this oval right here. And what this is going to give us is going to give us the distance from this line here, which this line right here that we just drew, this is going to be where the tip of the nose lands. And once we add this distance to it, right below, like this here is going to be where the chin is. So now that we know where the chin is going to actually be, let's find out how to draw it properly. So we know that this distance here from the center of this oval all the way down is going to be the size that we need to add to starting from this point here below. So we can do actually a parallel line to this. So we're going to start a parallel line from here. So as if it's starting from the eyebrow line right here, and we're going to go down parallel to this line right there, parallel, 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 until we have this distance here from this point here. So right about there. So you would know right now that the chin for the character would be right here. And from there, all we have to do is continue that line here that we started already to find the diameter of this oval. Keep going a little bit lower past this line right here, past the nose line. And then once you have kind of like the width of the chin, something like this, and of course, you know, a wider chin is going to normally be a little bit more masculine, and a thinner one is going to be a little bit more feminine. But anyways, once you have this, all you have to do is connect the dots. So you just go all the way up here and connect the dots like this, so that you can close the shape. And from here, from this side, well, what you can do is just start from the side here and just go down like that, all the way to the chin. So there you go. Now you would have a very basic head shape. And then, as you can see, it's fairly simple to draw it. There's not that many components to it. And drawing it in different angles is also not that complicated, as long as you're able to do this first step right there. And this is one of those things that initially seems daunting, it seems very technical, but it's actually very simple once you get the hang of it. So I'm going to do it for this one too. So right here we have the parallel line to the one here, splitting this sphere in half. So I'm going to take the same distance, so the same distance here, from here to the diameter of this oval, and then we're going to keep going, start from the center here, the symmetry line, and then we're going to go down, go down, go down, the same distance here, and then once again, and this is going to give us our chin. Now, of course, if you don't want it to be so straight, you can curve it a little bit. But anyways, right now I'm just going to go ahead and do a straight line because it's a little bit simpler. Now we'll have the chin. The chin is also going to share this line here. So the line for the chin is going to be parallel to the lines that we've drawn so far. There we go. And again, from this other side, go past the line a little bit to find kind of like the corner of the jaw, and then connect the dots back to the jaw, and then we can round things up so that it's not too pointy. Close the shape right here, and we would have another head in a different perspective. And then once you have that, well, you can erase kind of like the sphere here inside, because we're not going to need that anymore. And you can erase kind of all the stuff that's inside the head. There we go. This is how you draw the shape of the head. And then with this, you can draw it in any angle. It works in any angle, of course. As you can see here, I'm going to draw this one right here. So we'll draw the diameter, and then do a parallel line starting from the symmetry line on the face, straight down, and then double that line, straight down again. This is going to be the chin, and then extend this line to find the corner of the jaw, and then connect the dots. There we go. And then we can actually, again, close it like this, and we are done. So now we would have a face that is looking sideways here, looking to the side. The last example that's a little different, to kind of go back to what I mentioned initially, is the front view. So if we have a head looking straight ahead, with no particular perspective, so it's not looking sideways or anything like that. It's just looking at us straight ahead like this. To represent the shape of the head, this particular feature, this particular shape that the head has, which is not a perfect circle, it kind of gets thinner and thinner as you go towards the forehead. to represent that, instead of just chopping this like this on both sides, as if they were parallel, like this example right here. Instead of doing this, we are going to draw instead two ovals, but are really thin. Okay, let's see how close I am to the proper proportions. So 1/3, 1/3. I want to make sure that the oval is 2/3 high. So yeah, pretty close. As you can see here, it's the bottom of it, right here and right here. So it's almost spot on. So that would be the correct size for those ovals, and they would be, angled in a pretty good way. So if you're looking straight ahead, if you have a character that's looking straight ahead, you would look at making the ovals about this thin. So looking at proportions again, if we look at this right here and we split it in half, you know that the end of that ellipse right here would be about at a third of the distance for the 1/2 of the sphere. So 1/3, 2/3. So it would be about right here, right on it. And once you've drawn those ovals, then you need to kind of shave off a little bit of the head on both sides, because remember that this is now chopped a little bit. So not completely, so it's not going to be like this, it's not going to be this one again, but it's going to be a little bit thinner. So we're going to lose a little bit of the shape of the sphere. So the sides are going to look as if they're a little bit pushed in, just like that. So not too much, but just a little bit. And then from there, we are going to take the bottom here of these ovals, and we're going to duplicate that distance here that it gives us. So this much below this line, so we know that the chin will land right about here. So we can make it a little bit wider, and then we can keep going, prolong these lines here to give us kind of like the side here for the jaw, and then we can bring those back and meet at the chin and make sure we have a nice smooth curve like that. All right. So now we would have a head in the front-facing position. And we know that this head should be, in theory, in good proportion. And now we would be ready to move on to the next step and add an extra feature onto the faces. And this would be kind of the line to help us figure out where the cheekbone is going to go. So we're going to take the side of the chin right here, and we're going to trace a curve all the way to the center of the oval right there. So the curve is going to go about something like this. And it should give you something that's very similar to the mask of Boba Fett. So there we go. I'm going to do the same thing here on the side. So take the center of the oval and trace a curve all the way down to the side of the chin. So something like that. You can do it here too, like this. And for this one as well, chin's right here. There you go. So this is going to be, again, very simple, but this is going to be a guideline that helps us figure out a lot of the rest, a lot of the other features. Then finally, there's one more thing that we need to add before we're ready to slap on the different features. So the nose, the eyes, and all those things is going to be that line here that we already traced. So we already had the line, is the one that lines up with the bottom of the oval right here. So we'll want to draw this on as well. And of course the symmetry line if we don't have it for some reason. If you don't have it yet, I recommend that you draw this first, one of the first things that you draw, but if for some reason you don't have it, make sure that you have it. And that last line right here. So the one that I'm drawing here, this is going to be where the tip of the nose is going to land on. So it's pretty important that we find where this is going to go. So there we are. This would give us everything that we need to be able to draw this head easily in different angles, from the front view, from the side view, top view, and anything in between. And like I said, it's a little bit daunting at first, but it gets really, really easy really quickly once you get the hang of it. The hard part really is getting good at drawing those circles and those ovals on the side, and making sure that the ovals are the proper size in comparison So this is something that you should definitely practice all the time. It's definitely not one of those things that is fun to do if you're going to sit down on the computer and just and do art. It's definitely not fun to just draw a bunch of ovals, but it's one of those things that's really easy to do on the go. So always carry kind of like a sketch pad or something to draw on, a pen, whatever it is. And then when you're on the go, when you're not doing something, when you're waiting for someone, when you're at a coffee shop, or just daydreaming, really, this is the perfect time to practice those things. And it's only going to get easier with repetition. You really need to practice this stuff. Knowing how to do it's not going to help. So it's dexterity intensive. So you really have to practice a lot. But once you do, I promise everything else just is really, really easy. And now we are going to move on to the proportions. So this is going to be fairly quick because I'll go over it once I cover each of the different facial features. But I am going to quickly give you an overview of where everything goes on the head. Actually going to be pretty simple. So we already have a number of guidelines here that are going to be essential to drawing everything else. So what we have thus far. So this is the full head. So I'm going to draw from the top of the head to the chin. So this is going to be the full height of the head. And we know that starting from the eyebrow line, so this one right here, we can split the rest in half. So we're going to have at the halfway point, this is going to be the nose, the tip of the nose. Here is going to be the eyebrow. And then at the bottom, we're going to have the chin. Now, we can actually split this third in half, and we can actually split this last third here at the bottom in thirds again. And this is going to give us, right here, this is going to give us the top of the chin. And right here, we're going to have the mouth. And in between the eyebrow and the nose, we're going to have the bottom of the eye socket. Right, so far we have 1/3 right here. We have another third right here. And we're going to take another third, and this is going to give us the hairline. So the hairline is going to land right here, right at the third. Now this last one, the top of the head, not really relevant. Doesn't really matter because it's already there. The only one that's interesting, semi-interesting, is the hairline here. So this is not something that you'll need all the time. Some characters are not going to have hairlines. So sometimes you'll have like bangs, or sometimes you're just going to be bald or whatever. But anyways, that hairline here would land right where this thing here, right at the line created by the top of the oval. And then we're going to take a look at everything else. So next down, the eyebrow. So we would have the eyebrow right on this line right here. And then we have, if we split this in half here, tip of the nose, and then we split it in half, this line right here, this would give us the bottom of the eye socket. So the eye would go somewhere in this area. So you would have the eye right here. Next, like I said, we have the nose. So that would be the tip of the nose. This is where the tip of the nose would be. And then finally, if we split this last segment here, this last third, in 3 parts, so in thirds again, you would have the mouth right here. So this line here would be the line for the mouth. And right underneath here, you would have kind of like the upper portion of the chin, so the top of the chin. And then we'd have kind of like the lip starting right above that. And then the lip right on here. So there you go. So this is how you would find all the proportions for all the facial features. And then, of course, in the following chapters, we're going to take a look at how to draw them properly. There's one more thing that we need to take a look at, and it is how to place the ear. So the ear, again, we're going to take a look at how to draw it properly in the next chapters, but how to place it on here, fairly simple again. So this is going to be the size, like the diameter here is going to be the size of the ear as well. So what we're going to do is we start a little bit lower, and then at the line here at the top, this is where the ear is going to touch. So that's going to be kind of like the height of the ear. And the hair is going to go attach itself right down here where the oval ends. So you would have something like that. Starts like this, goes down, and then attaches itself. There we go. So that would be where the ear goes. And this is how you create a head and figure out the proper proportions, the proper locations for all the facial features. So very simple. Once again, only a couple things to worry about. As soon as you've drawn kind of like the base shape for the head, all you have to worry about is those two lower thirds. Those are the important ones right here. And there we go. So we are going to take a look at how to draw the ears next. The first body part that we're going to take a deeper look into is going to be the ear. So the ear always looks pretty daunting to draw. There's a lot of stuff there, especially compared to something more simple like a nose. So even though the ear might look a little bit scary to draw, there's actually a lot of things here that we can again break down into different steps and simplify quite a bit, so that drawing it will hopefully seem much easier. What I have right here is I have different ovals, and this is going to be the kind of like the canvas that we'll be drawing the ears on. So those are just simple different angles for the head. So as you can see here, this is as if the head is facing us, but also looking down. So it's as if this head would look down here, so the eyes would be right about there. So this is going to be a pretty intense angle to draw the ear. Next, this one here is very similar to this version right there. So this is going to be a head kind of slightly looking up from the side, and we'll have a head looking sideways, so looking to the right and looking to the left, and we'll have the ear come kind of flat on the surface there, so without much perspective. So this should give us a pretty good range of variations. So looking at this, the first thing, as usual, that we'll want to do is try to simplify it into a really simple volume so that we can easily draw it on the surface, in perspective. So we are going to take this and simplify it into just a box in perspective. Very simple to draw again, very simple to attach to a line here. So I'm going to be doing the example with this one here, the box. Of course, an ear is more complex than this, but just to position it on the surface of the head, we'll want to use this first. So what is this going to look like from the top view? So this is also kind of important. So let's say we have the top view, the top of the head right here, and we know that the head gets narrower towards the front of the head, where the forehead is. We have the nose kind of right here, and the ears don't lay flat on the side of the head like this. They actually are tilted forward just a bit, so that we can hear the sounds that are coming in front of us more easily. So it's actually going to be like this. So we'll have kind of our rectangles placed like this and attached at this point right here, at this corner. All right, so since we are using a square, a very simple shape, we're just going to use the entire width of this thing. So we're going to draw the square like this. So if I were to draw a square that would be laying flat on the surface, I would draw it like this, following the lines right here, parallel to the direction of the head. But we're not. It's not laying flat. Instead, it's going to be tilted forward just a little bit. So I'm not going to be following that line quite perfectly. Instead, it's going to be a little bit more like that. You don't want to go too much like this. It's not going to be a 90-degree angle. Otherwise, the ear will look like it's like this, and it'll look kind of weird. So just a little bit, just not parallel, but close. So maybe the one I drew is a little bit too intense even. I'm going to go back and do something like that. All right, so almost the same. And then we can close that box. Actually, I'm going to give it a little bit thickness here in the front. So we're going to have a very simple box like this to represent the ear. Now from the side view, it's going to look very simple. So for as far back as it goes, I'm gonna go right about like the halfway point here of this circle right here. So it's gonna go something like this, and then of course we'll kind of sculpt the ear within this square. But for now, just use the entire space and consider that the back of the ear will reach about the halfway point right there. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll have the initial line here where the ear is connected. Draw the little box. Give it a little bit of thickness. And of course, we're not going to go parallel to the line. We're going to divert a little bit. So something like that. Parallel lines all the way down. Parallel lines again like this to close the box. Alright, so now we have the ear kind of placed in the correct position on the side of the head. So next up is going to be shaping off parts of this box so that we get a shape that is a little bit closer to a real ear. So the way to do this is initially we're going to do it from the side view because it's a little bit more obvious. But what we want to do is kind of trace a half a heart. So we're going to start below this line here. So the ear will start right about here. So maybe like a third of the way, right? So right about there, a third of the way, third of the way. So we'll start like this, and then we'll go all the way up from the side view. We're going to touch, and then back, and kind of create a half a heart shape like this. And then you can go back up a little bit at the bottom here, at the lobe of the ear. And then once we have that, we can actually get rid of the rest. So we don't need the rest of the box now. The rest of the box is only to position it in space properly. So now we have this ear right there. It's in a good-ish shape. There's so many shapes for ears that you can almost draw anything. It'll probably represent an existing ear somewhere. So as long as it's around something like that, you should be good to go. And now from here, what we're going to do is you can almost imagine like this is kind of like the start of a 9. If you close it like this, you have kind of like this 9 shape. What we're going to do is we're going to draw another 9, but inside of this shape. So we want to draw kind of like the initial circle for the 9, pretty close to the outside walls of the ear. So pretty close to the helix of the ear. And then we're going to create a nice circle like this, and then close the 9, and of course, if you're drawing the ear from the other side, it won't be a 9. Of course, it'll be more like a weird P or something. But you get the idea. And then once as we go down here, we're going to get closer and closer to the inside. So we want this distance here to get wider and wider, right? And then we're going to stop right about here. So we get a nice 9 like this. So this is going to be the start of any ear. So this is what you should do first. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other one as well. So we'll have the arch shape. So the tip of the ear is going to touch right about the center mark of this box right there. So we're going to go like this, touch, and then touch the back, and then bring it back down just like that. All right. Then we'll do the same thing here, start here, and of course, as the oval here is getting tighter and tighter, so will our curves. So in this case here, we have a nice perfect circle in the center of the ear. Of course, the circle in here is not going to be like this. It will be much tighter to represent the same perspective as the oval that it's in. Same here. So we'll have a tighter circle. It's not going to be as perfectly round as the first one that we drew. So something like this, and then as we go down, it gets wider and wider here until we reach about this point right there. All right, and now we're going to do the same thing here. Go up, touch the other side, down, and there we go. And now we're going to trace the 9 in the center here. And down, and there we go. So now let's get rid of the box around these other ones. No longer needed. But what we're left with is a little bit of thickness here, as you can see. So this is good. So we're going to erase the other lines. All the straight lines we can get rid of at this point, because there's no straight line when drawing an ear. So now we're left with this shape right there. So we're going to close everything up. So I'm going to remove the lines here too. And now all we have to do is join those two lines here and like a nice curve, so like a nice C, and touch the inside right there to join kind of the lower part of the helix right here. And we're going to do the same thing here. And of course, you know, you can look at this curve right there. This curve matches this circle here. When the circle and when the oval becomes tighter and tighter, so does the curve. So it's not going to be as round, and it's going to be even less round for this one here. And now we are going to close off the top part of the ear. So the way to do this is we just continue this line here, so the outside wall of the ear. We're just going to continue it, wrap up inside, and kind of just close right about here, right in the center of the circle. So close like this, and then the same thing here, like this, and close. And then the same thing here, like this, and close right about there. So from the top view, so the shape really is that you can see kind of like the top of the ear like this, and then it's as if it wraps up behind like that. Goes just like that. And this thickness right here, this is the initial thickness of the box that we drew. So it's important that we maintain that thickness here on, you know, at the top of the ear like this. All right, so now we have kind of like this weird shape like this, and that's good. So we're on the way. So we're gonna remove kind of like the circle that we drew. We don't need that anymore. So all we're gonna be left with is this nice spiral. So nice flowing spiral, and we are almost done at this point. So a couple things left. We want to close that shape. So right now it's an open shape. We want to close this off. So the way to do this is we're going to continue that line here, and every time we continue a line, it always flows nicely from one another. So it doesn't go like this. It has to follow the line and then slowly diverge. So that's what we're going to do here. Follow the line, and then we're going to create a little bit of a bump. This is going to be the tragus, like this. Tragus right here, a little bump, and then back in to close and touch the lobe of the earlobe. So you kind of get this shape here. So like an inverted S from this side, like this, bump, back to the earlobe, like this, bump, back to the earlobe. And then from the front view here, the tragus might be sticking out a little bit, actually. So from the side, we're not going to notice, but from the front view, this part here is actually sticking out a little bit from the side of the head. So we'll create a more visible bump this way. All right, so now we're almost done. There's only one more part to add to this whole thing. It's going to be the anti-helix. And the anti-helix looks very similar to a Y. So, you know, on the outside, it looks very similar to this. So this is what we need to add inside of the ear right now. So I'm going to draw it with a line, but this is actually something that sticks out from the ear. So, but the shape of it, what you want to do is you want to start here from the side, the lower portion of the ear, and then go back up, and then curve in a very similar way of as this shape right here, this nice curve, this nice 9. So we'll do the same thing here. Go up and curve until it meets kind of like the inside of the ear right there. And then we're gonna start from the same spot, keep going, but instead it'll curve a little bit higher and touch kind of like the top of the ear instead. So we have kind of like this weird Y in the ear. So we're going to do the same thing here. Starts from the lobe of the ear, goes up, curves, goes up, touches the top now. So these shapes, this Y, this shape right here, this is actually, it's actually going to stick out quite a bit. So if we look at it from the side view here, you know, that Y would be like this, and then it would connect back here. As you can see here, it's not a flat Y, it sticks out, it has a curve to it. So from this view here, we'll have the Y, the top part of the Y like this, curve down, then curve up again and back in. But to draw this properly, we'll have to have it stick out here. So it'll be more like this instead, more like this version. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace those black lines with white instead. So you can see here, it's still the same Y, but instead of just drawing it with lines, I drew kind of like the outside of the Y. So this is what it looks like now. And then the helix that we have here kind of blends in with the Y, and they become just one line, and then that line fades as it gets closer to the earlobe. So as you can see here, those two are like merged right there. So we're gonna erase that and have them just fade like this instead. Same here, but right now it's behind, so we're not really able to see it properly. And there you have it. So this is how you draw an ear. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. It's a little bit easier when you actually paint it. So I'm going to try to represent that with a little bit of shading. So all this here, and by the way, the whole of the ear is kind of like behind this, behind the tragus right here, like at the top right there. So we're not going to see it from the front here. Might be able to see it a little bit from the side view, but it would be right about there. So I'm going to try to finish this off with a little bit of shading so it looks a little bit nicer. And you know, this is a pretty generic ear. Of course, like I said, there's ears of many kinds, so we can definitely go in here and kind of like change the anatomy a little bit. So maybe make the lobule a little bit bigger, like that. You can also definitely change the outside of the ear, so the shape, instead of being a perfect 9, it can be a 9 that's a little bit deformed, so maybe like this, a little bit pointy instead, like that. That works too. As long as the main components are still there, as long as all the main shapes still remain, you can pretty much do anything you want. There's ears of so many different kinds that, so that would work too. And now I'm going to, so this part here, the anti-helix, goes underneath the helix, which is the outside portion of the ear, the top portion here. This is the helix. This here is the anti-helix, the little Y. So the helix is kind of like a hood covering the anti-helix. Then you have this part here kind of just fade in. There we go. So that would be kind of like a basic shading for the ear. And this is kind of how you draw an ear. So from the side, pretty simple. I'm going to add the same shading here. So this entire region here is a little bit darker. And now I'm going to use the anti-helix to brighten things up. So instead of being dark lines right here, I'm going to paint it or draw it with a white line instead on a dark background, so that it looks like it's actually sticking out like it should be, just like that. All right, so that looks a little bit better already. Can make things a little bit darker up here. And there we go. We have another ear, and then the top, the other one here at a more critical angle. I'm going to do the same thing, add a little bit of shading here in the cavities, and then use the anti-helix to bring the shape back with white. And then once you know kind of this anatomy, it's cool because you can deform it in many different ways. So if you want to have like pointy ears, you can definitely do that. You just have to stretch things out a little bit. So make the anti-helix take a little bit more space. So maybe it goes higher like this, and have the helix just cover it properly. It would still kind of work. And we still have the nice Y shape that we need for the anti-helix, like this. And we have the helix on top, covering it. So no problem, it still works. But now it's a pointy ear. And then finally, if we want to attach this to the head properly, maybe you'll want to kind of smooth out that line right here where it connects to the side of the head, so it's not as intense. So maybe something like that instead. This is how you draw the ear in perspective. A couple things again that are important to remember. The ear is oriented like this, so it's like it's facing us at all times, unless you're watching someone from behind. And by the way, if we are going to draw something from behind, an ear from behind, you have kind of like a simple cylinder to attach it to. So this is what attaches to the head, and then it flares out like this to become a bigger cylinder, and then the ear attaches itself onto that, and it's going to be kind of a like a big S. So something like this. S, and then goes back, and more like a really stretched out 8. So right here, this is going to be lobule. Then we have the helix on top right here, so we're going to give it a little bit of thickness, and we are going to see also the anti-helix a little bit maybe. So we kind of be this shape. Still a pretty simple shape, kind of just like this big S like this, and then you just need to give it a little bit of thickness like this or like that, and then you attach it to the side of the head, and you're good to go. It's almost also like a hat. So, fashionable hat. There we go. Now, to recap all the steps that are required. First, you draw your circle, not your circle. First, you draw your rectangle, if you want to, and then within that rectangle, what you're going to draw is half a heart. So you start with this. Make sure that the connection line here is straight, and that you have something that looks kind of like a heart. So if you close it, it looks like that, or maybe like a peach. And inside of this heart, you're going to draw a 9. So you start with the big circle first for the 9. Make sure that you're really, really close to the outside wall of the ear, and then you bring down that 9 here, and then make sure that the distance here between those two lines get thicker and thicker as you finish the 9 right about in the center of the ear right there. After you have the 9 drawn, you can erase the straight line that you initially used to attach the ear onto the head, and you can continue that line right here until right about the center of the ear, and then you can close it. And then you can do the same thing at the bottom here, close those two lines. So what you are left with is like this nice 9 looking spiral. And of course, all those lines have to flow nicely, so you don't want anything to break. You want nice flowing curves. So it takes a little bit of dexterity again, because it's curves are hard. But practice this. Make sure that it looks nice and it flows nicely. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to create another kind of like inverted S, really subtly. So like this inverted S, this shape here. So this is going to give us the tragus, excuse me, like right here. Right behind the tragus, we have the hole for the ear, which is going to be the external auditory meatus. That's how it's called. This is where the sound goes into. Next up, we are going to add the anti-helix, which is a Y shape that stems from the base of the ear. And once you have this, once the shape is closed, now what you can do is add a little bit of shading in here, so make everything darker inside of the shape, inside of the closed shape. And now we'll be able to draw the anti-helix pretty easily. So you can go back to a white brush, or you can just erase if you're drawing on the pen with a pencil. And we can start the Y from the base here. So we start the Y, curve in almost to draw another 9. Then the other one will start from the same base, and then instead we'll go and touch the top of the ear instead. So now we can add a little bit of blending, and we can extend that line right here a little bit lower, so that it goes almost all the way down. And we can soften those lines like this, and we have a ear. So this is the process of drawing an ear, and then from there, like I said, you can deform it in any way you want. But those are the steps. As you can see, once you do it a couple times, it's actually fairly simple. So there's not that many steps. Drawing an ear properly is very, very important. It's one of those things that most beginners, it's a mistake that most beginners will make, and that is kind of neglecting the ear and not drawing them properly. But it's one of those things that are really, really easy to spot when an ear looks wrong. You might have a hard time drawing it from memory, but you'll always know when you're looking at an ear if it's right or not, because it's something that you see every day. Everybody's got them. Everybody has them on display. So whenever it's slightly wrong, then you'll be able to pick up on it. So don't neglect drawing your ears. So this is going to conclude this chapter on the anatomy of the ear and how to draw an ear. And we are going to move on to drawing the nose and the eyebrows. The next part we're going to take a look at is the nose. So, and also the eyebrows. So, before we actually take a look at how this attaches to the face, we are going to take a look at how to construct it and what the different parts, the different components of the nose are. So when we look at different noses, it's a little bit hard to see how they are, how to be able to draw this, because they all seem so different. So some are big, some are wide, some are narrow, some are long, some are short, some have really big nostrils, some have small nostrils, some are really well defined, some are less defined. So it's easy to get mixed up in all their differences, but there's obviously a number of similarities, and this is what we'll want to focus on. And once we know this, then you'll be able to deform the nose as much as you want and create all kinds of variants. So before we actually take a look at how to simplify the nose, we're going to take a look at its anatomy a little bit, and to get more familiar with the different pieces, the different components of the nose, and also the vocabulary a little bit. Where is the nose attached? So the nose in itself has no bones. It's just mostly cartilage and a little bit of muscles and fat tissue. And it attaches, of course, onto the skull. So it attaches right here. So what we have right here, if we look at the skull, we have the nasal bone, which is going to be this one right here. So this section right here. It's a bone that has two parts. So you can see here it's split down the middle, and it has two parts here. And then this stems right at the glabella, which is this area right here, the area between the two eyes. When we look at a nose like this one in particular might not seem like there's much to it. It might seem like a simple shape in some cases, but there's a number of different highlight variants here, number of different surfaces that are very subtle in this case, but are existent. And so we need to understand what creates those things, what creates those variants in the surface. And to do this, we're going to take a look at exactly what is inside here once we remove the skin. So right underneath, and the nose is a little bit more complicated than this, so we're just going to focus on the main parts, the bigger parts. So right now, we're going to take a look at three different parts. So we'll have the nasal bone right here. So this is going to be the area where the cartilage attaches itself, like I said. So the lower section of the bridge of the nose is going to be called the lateral cartilage. And this is going to be, as the name suggests, just cartilage. So everything that's in blue here is cartilage. And it has a particular shape. And as you can see also, it's split in half. So some of you might be able to feel this if you press on the top of your nose. There's two edges right here that are pretty hard, and then you might be able to feel something soft in the center. So that would be this separation there. So the shape of this cartilage is going to be interesting. It'll be kind of like a pointy shape as it merges with the other section, which is going to be the tip of the nose, and we can also call the ball. And this piece of cartilage is going to be called the greater alar cartilage. And again, this is also going to be split in half. So the entire nose is split in half essentially. And then we'll have on the side here the nostrils, which we can also call the wings. So we'll have the block of the nose, which is this section here. This is going to be the ball, which is the tip, and we'll have the wings, which are on the sides right there. So those are all the main components. Those are the ones that are going to affect the surface when we paint it or when we draw it. All right, now that we know what lies underneath the skin, we can now take a look at real noses and try to spot all those different pieces. So in some cases, it's going to be pretty hard. So some noses are really just too soft, like this one right here. We're not going to be able to spot much. Same thing with this one here. It's a man's nose. This one here is starting to be a little bit more interesting. So we're able to spot at least the split in half that happens at the tip of the nose right here. So we can see here it kind of digs in like this. So this right here would be kind of like the split in the center. And then you would have the greater alar cartilage which would go then like this and back here. And we can see we can find this really nice pointy shape here that we find when the lateral cartilage meets the greater alar cartilage right here, this little arrow right there. So very visible on this particular nose. And again, this will be split in half down the center. And then we can see the same thing on another one right here. So this nose right here is also really interesting because for the same reasons. So we can easily see the shape of the greater alar cartilage right here. So we're not able to see kind of like the split in the center as well on this one, but we can definitely see the shape that it creates here when it meets the nostril. So this shape right here. And then the lateral cartilage with its pointy bit attaching like this. We can find the same thing here. So we have the lateral cartilage right there, all the way down to the nostril, all the way up to the nose. And you can easily see also in this picture here where the nasal bone ends. So it would be right here at the bump. So the bone would be like this. So we'd have the two halves right here. And then the lateral cartilage would begin. Just like that. And then at the tip, you would have the greater alar cartilage going like this. And then back inside. And we would have the nostrils or the wings right here. And if we look a little bit more closely at this here, we can see that this section here, the tip of the ball for the nose, actually the cartilage wraps up and then inside of the nostril. And this part of the cartilage will form kind of half of the nostril with the wing forming the other half. So the nostril itself is not a circle like this, but it's instead something more like a comma or a shape like this instead. So now that we are a little bit more familiar with the anatomy of the nose, a really good exercise is to do what I just did now and try to draw those same shapes onto real noses on photos to be able to train your eye to spot those different shapes. And then when you're actually about to draw it, they'll pop back in your mind, and you'll be able to pay a little bit more attention and to ensure that your noses are a little bit more accurate. But moving on, what we're going to do is we're going to try to simplify these shapes into something that's a little bit more simple, because right now we kind of looked at the anatomy and it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff there, but the way to draw the nose initially can be simplified quite a bit. So if we look at this shape right here, so we have the glabella, which is this shape right here. Remember that we have the ball and the wings and the top portion of the block. And then we can kind of see like the change of light here. So it's going to give us kind of like a shape like this. So we can ignore the nostrils for now. We can ignore kind of like the roundness of the nose and simplify this to a simple box really. So something like this. And then just close the shape underneath. So this would be kind of like what we are trying to draw when drawing a nose from imagination. So if I redo this on the right here on the side in a little bit in a cleaner way, so we would have the top, so the bridge of the nose, and then it goes down, 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 and then as it goes down, we can start to flare it out, so to make it a little bit wider as it goes down, and then we'll have the sides of the box like this that will follow the rest of the nose, and will also get slightly bigger as it comes down, and then we can close this shape right here like this, like that. So we have a simple box. Now we can tweak this a little bit. So we can actually improve upon this a little bit more because this doesn't quite represent a nose too well. But you'll see that the differences that I make are actually really small. So let's say you have something like this. One thing that we are going to do is add a little bit of a curve in here. So we'll curve the nose at the bottom, so like this, so we can erase the line that was straight. So we'll curve this, and we are going to curve these, but the other side, so on the outside instead. So push them out. And then instead of a straight line down here, we'll have a curve again. So a curve to kind of match the curve of the tip of the nose right there. So like a parallel curve, same distance everywhere. All right, so it's still fairly simple. We didn't add that much to it, but this represents a nose a little bit more accurately. And then we can also kind of curve this right here, these lines here, to give it a little bit more of an organic look, as opposed to something that's still a little too stiff. All right, so still kind of like a box, but a little bit more complex. So again, you can definitely start with a box and then do this as a second step. So let's now place this on the face. So this is the tricky part, always where to place it, how to place it properly, and what does it look like in different perspectives and different angles. So the nose is going to be, as we remember, the tip of the nose, or not quite the tip of the nose, but the nostrils are going to land on the line right here. So the line starting from the bottom of the side oval, or also the bottom of the ear, where the ear connects to the head. And if we remember our different ratios for this, so we have 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. The first third here will be split in 3. This one will be split in half, and we have the hairline all the way up here, and the nose will be right there. And then, so we know that the nostrils are going to land somewhere around here, on this line right there. So what we can do right now is we're going to try to draw this box. But first, I want to make sure that we have the right dimensions for the nose. So of course, the noses can be many sizes; they can be big and small. But for the most average proportions, something that will make it easier for us to draw, we'll take a look at the front view for now to try to figure out how wide should it be based on all our existing guides. So all these lines here is just based on what we did previously. So we have the mouth right here, the top of the chin, the nose right here, the nose line, and we would have the bottom of the eye socket and the eyebrows right there, if we remember correctly. So we know that the nose is going to land right on this line right there. And in this case, this person is looking at us completely straight, so straight ahead. There's no tilt to the head, so the head is not tilt back, it's not tilt forward. And we can tell by how the ears align with the eyebrows. So right now it's on the same line. If you have your eyebrows right here, and you have your ears, the tip of your ears landing on the same line, then you can guess, and you can be pretty sure that this person is not tilting the head. If they are, on the other hand, so if they were tilting their head forward, the ears would appear higher. They might be up here or maybe even higher compared to the brow line. So the brow line might be down here, and this would indicate that the person is looking down. So maybe the nose would be down here, and you have the mouth here. And this person will be looking kind of like at the ground instead. Or if we have it the other way around, where the ears are lower on the head, so maybe something like this, and the eyebrow line is higher, then it would indicate the opposite, that the person is looking up. But in this case, we have the straight line, so we know that this guy is centered and looking at us straight. So the way to draw the nose here, or the way to draw the box for the nose initially, is to split everything in quarters. So I'm going to split, and not everything, but split this line here in quarters. So I'm not going to worry about anything else. what we're going to worry about is this region right here, so the front of the face. And we're going to split that in quarters like I just said. So in halves, then in halves again. And this, so 1/4 plus 1/4 is going to give us a half. So this is going to be the width of the nose. And if we take another half, this is going to be the width of the eyes. So we'll have one eye right here, and then the same distance for the nose, so an eye distance between the two eyes essentially, and then the other eye. So it's almost as if we have 3 eyes. But with this, we would know that the nose is at a proper size in comparison to the rest of the face. So this is kind of how you get the measurements for the nose. And then from there, as we remember, we would have kind of like the glabella going like this first. So kind of like this inverted keystone shape. And from there, we would have the start of the block, which we can actually make go all the way down for now. Get a little bit wider. And then that would be the bottom of the shape right there. And now, once we have this shape here, we remember that what we can do is actually to curve things a little bit. So we can add a little bit of a curve to the sides here. A bit of a curve like this. And a curve for the tip as well. Curve down, then curve up where the nostrils are, like that. So that would give us kind of a good starting point for the nose, and then from there we'll be able to easily draw the rest of the shapes, so the rest of the volumes, like the ball, the wings, and the bridge properly. But before we add more details, I'm going to draw the same thing here, but on this head facing sideways instead. So this will be kind of a more complicated subject. So again, we're going to do the same process. So we're going to figure out where in here does the nose begin. So we're going to take this distance here, split it in half, and then half again. So in this case, we're going to eyeball it a little bit because it's curving back. So right about there, and then that would be kind of like the width of the nose. So this right here. So we can draw a parallel to this line here, the symmetry line of the face, like that. So that would be kind of like the base of the square of the box. And then of course we remember we have the glabella, so we want to draw this shape right here before we draw the box of the nose. And then from the side view, of course, you know, the nose is not going to go straight down like this. This is just the base of the nose. The nose from the side will look something like this. So this is where it attaches on the surface of the face. And then we have the glabella, that's like this. So this shape right here, this shape right there, is right. It would be this one right here. And then you have kind of like the forehead going like this. So the glabella, as you can see, it goes inside the face. And then you would have the nose that begins like this. So, of course, it wouldn't be flat on the surface. It would have some sort of volume. So you would have the nose right there. So there you go. So that would be kind of like the box that we built. So the nose, the top of the nose, and then the side of the box. So I'm going to do the same process here. Point out the nose block, going all the way down to the ball. Then we can close it. And now we can just connect the dots. So we have already the base of the shape right there. So we just connect the dot with the tip. Connect, connect. And we would have a nose. Now that we know how to simplify it and how to place it on the face, now comes the time to add a little bit more detail in here. So right now this is obviously a little bit too simple, especially when we look at the real version that is like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the nose in 3 different parts, the parts that we've seen so far. So the ball, block, and the wings. One of the first things that I want to take a look at, I really want to suggest the presence of the nasal bone, which is completely non-existent right now in this case right here. So what's interesting with the nasal bone is that at the connection here, where the nasal bone meets the lateral cartilage, the nose is actually wider. So it starts pretty thin, pretty narrow right here, but then as it goes towards the meeting point with the lateral cartilage, it widens, and then it becomes a little bit wider. And this is going to be the widest part of the bridge of the nose. So if the block ends kind of like right here, about like 2/3 down, and then from there the ball is going to start. What we want to do is right after the glabella, so right after the dip, right after the hole, not the hole, but like right after it kind of goes in and back out again, right after that we'll want to make that part a little bit wider, and then maybe bring it in a little bit, so you kind of get the shape right, like this. So if I draw this on this side right here, we'd have this section here that's pretty narrow, and then as soon as it connects, it widens like this, and then gets narrower and narrower as it goes down the nose to meet the ball of the nose. And in most cases, also, when that connection happens, when the nasal bone meets the lateral cartilage, you'll have also this little bump here. So if you look at it from the side, where is it? If you look at it from the side here, you would have the glabella right here, this line right there, in red. And then you have the nasal bone right here. Then when the nasal bone meets the lateral cartilage, the nose would actually keep going straight because that would make the nose a little bit too big. Instead, it shifts and it goes down like this. Maybe not as much, but to some degree. And then you would have kind of like the tip of the nose right here with the nostrils. So we have kind of like a break in the line of the nose right here. It's not a straight line. You have kind of like this bump where the two meet, where the cartilage and the bone meet. And this is right about here as it gets wider. So in perspective like this, probably going to be a little bit hard to represent it, so don't worry about it. But if you draw a nose from the side, make sure that it's not a straight line like this. Make sure that you incorporate that bump here, or make a conscious decision to make it go away if that's a stylistic choice of yours. But just know that there should be one in most cases. All right. So moving on, we're going to draw the ball of the nose. So we remember that the block ends in like a pointy shape, just like this one here, where the lateral cartilage meets the great alar cartilage. So we can do the same thing here, like this, instead of a straight line. This is going to give us a more accurate representation of the ball of the nose. So very, very simple. Since we have the little V already here, the little arrow, what we can do is we can start at the tip here. So the ball is going to start right the tip where the V begins, and what it's going to do is just going to curve down and meet kind of like the highest point here of the curve. So now we can erase kind of like this one right here, this plane right here. Instead, the new plane will be this, and then we can give this a little bit of thickness. So maybe make that curve a little bit rounder to make it look a little bit more like a ball. And then we know that this shape is actually going to wrap inside, so it's going to continue like this, and then in towards the face to go meet the center here, the intersection that we remember, this intersection right here. So we know that this is going to be the base for the nostril. So the ball is going to essentially go meet up there, something like that. Then we can give that a little bit of thickness, and then we already have kind of like the first half of the nostril, so we can start to erase the other stuff here. And now to create the nostrils, well, what we're going to do is we're going to start here from the ball, from the side of the ball, and we're going to go straight down, following this curve here, so like this on the volume, and then we're going to use this as the base, and then we're going to extrude from there a box to give the nostril a little bit of the wing a little bit of a thickness. But there we go, and then at the bottom here we can just blend all of this together, and then in here it's actually going to go back towards the nostril. So there we go. So now we have the box for the wings, and I'm going to add a little bit of shading to this. So right now it's just a box, but we can actually soften that to make that maybe a little bit more like a curve kind of volume now. All that would be left to do now is just soften things up. So it's still pretty boxy. So what we want to do is just soften everything up and kind of use the shapes that we already have to guide the shading a little bit. Alright, there we go. So I am going to do the same process from the front here. As you can see here, knowing the construction of a nose like this, knowing all the different parts to be able to assemble them properly, it really makes a big difference. Not necessarily when you're just drawing line art like this, but it really makes a big difference when you actually enter and start shading things with with a light source and with shadows and highlights. So knowing where the different parts, knowing what the different parts are and where they begin, where they end, knowing this right here, very, very important when it comes to time to shading your nose. So there's one last thing that I want to show here, and it is the eyebrows. So the eyebrows are going to be kind of part of the nose in a way because they are on a very similar plane. So if this is one plane right here, the forehead, if this is all one plane, the glabella here isn't. As we know, it goes back in here. So this plane right here is actually the very similar plane to the nose. So as you can see here, those lines are kind of parallel. So those two planes here would be the same. And so the eyebrows are also going to land on this thing here. So they're going to start right at the edges of this keystone, inverted keystone shape for the glabella. We're going to start right here, and eyebrows are three different lines. So you have the initial line that goes up like this. Then you have the longer line that still goes up a little bit, but very slightly. So it's almost horizontal, but not quite. So it goes up a little bit, and then it peaks. And then from there, it goes down, it goes back down. As far as the thickness of things, so initially it will start in almost like a pointy shape. Then it will get a little bit bigger, and it will be at its thickest at the second intersection here. So it will be thickest right here, and then it'll start to diminish in size, and then it'll get very subtle towards the end of the eyebrow here, and we might actually start to lose some of the hair like this. So it'll start to fade a lot more. So that would be kind of a simplistic way to draw the eyebrow. So we're going to draw it here again. So first intersection, a little bit thicker, and then it starts to go up just a little bit. So as you can see here, we have the horizontal line for the eyebrows, and then we can use that as a guide. So in this case, it's going to be a little bit higher than that. It's not going to be quite parallel to it. And then back down a little bit, not too much. And then we're going to set things up here so that we're ready to jump on the eyes in the following chapters. So the way this works here, as we've seen here, since the glabella here kind of goes inside of the shape of the face, so does the eye socket. So this entire section here is actually receding towards the center of the head. It's not flat. So if we look at it from the side, a really good way to spot this is looking at the skull right here. So we can see that the eye is just straight. It's not a flat like this. You have the eyebrow here, and the eye socket actually goes in like this. The forehead like this, and then the eye socket goes inside, and then comes back out for the cheek. So this is going to be the cheek right here. It comes back out, and then it will just blend in like this. So you'll have your cheek right here. But this means that the eye socket is going to be inside the shape of the head. So we'll have the eyeball right there. And this is convenient because if it rains or if there's water pouring down, then it's not going to land in your eyeball. And so it's like a little umbrella for your eyes. But it's important to represent it here. And so the eyebrow is going to land right on the outside of that line, right on the surface of the head, but the eyes themselves are actually going to recede inside, so they're going to be further in. So we can illustrate that with a little bit of shading by making this entire area here darker. So now it's starting to look pretty good. So we're starting to see the face starting to come out, to come alive, and this is how you draw the nose. Next, we'll take a look at how to draw the mouth area. See you in a bit. When drawing the human head, the mouth area is probably one of the easiest parts to draw because it is a simple volume in comparison to almost everything else. But there are still a couple of things that we really need to pay attention to. So we are going to take a look at first the mouth's anatomy and kind of the different shapes that make up the entire volume of the mouth area. And also after that, we are going to take a look at how to simplify it in the most in the simplest way, so that we are able to draw it in any angle on the faces that we've drawn so far. So the same process that we did for the nose. Now first, if we take a look at the anatomy of the mouth, so it's no surprise with all the different movements that are involved with the mouth that it is pretty heavy in terms of muscles. So there's muscles essentially pulling in every direction around the mouth, but there are only a few that we are interested in that actually influence the shape of the mouth. And those are going to be these two right here. So we'll have, the node one is not really a muscle, it's more like a connection point. But the orbicularis oris is the one that is wrapping around the mouth and around the lips. And this is the one that is going to allow us to whistle or to create the O shape with our mouth. And it's interesting because it wraps around the entire mouth opening and definitely gives volume to the area. And now the node is particularly interesting in when it comes to the corner of the mouth right here. So we can see it a little bit better here, but the shape, the switch of highlight from kind of a mid gray to a lighter gray right here, if you can see here, if we can see this. So it's as if there's like a small dent right here before the lip comes out again. So this is caused by the node and the fact that the orbicularis oris is tucked in under the node when it meets at the corner of the eye, at the corner of the mouth right there. So this section here overlaps this part of the orbicularis oris, and as a result, it creates this thing that we can almost see here as well. So there's always a little bit of shadow here. You can see it as well here, with the lip always sticking out a little bit more than this section right here. Not so visible on this one, maybe just a little bit here. So this is what this is going to affect. It's going to be the corner of the mouth here. We're always going to have, especially when it pinches, always going to have a very, very slight shadow in this area. And then we'll have this part here catch the light a little bit more than this part back here because of the node. I'm exaggerating it on this side here, but you can see it does almost the same thing on the other side. It's just much more subtle. But this is what this node does essentially to the corner of the mouth. So the next thing that's pretty important when it comes to the shape of the mouth that we need to note is that it's not flat. It's definitely not flat. If we look at it from the side here, we have the teeth wrapping around in kind of a really circular fashion, and as a result, the lip kind of follow the same path, the same curve around the teeth. So what this is going to give us is this circular shape, this like sphere, this ball in this area right there. And this ball can actually be placed pretty accurately with the bottom of the ball kind of placed at the top of the chin right here, and the top of the ball somewhere in the, around the center of the nose cavity. So you can create a nice round ball like this, and this is going to be the mouth sphere. And we are actually going to use that to draw the mouth a little bit later. And that ball shape here is in part created by the orbicularis oris in the way that it's shaped, in the way that the muscle is shaped around the lips. Alright, and next let's take a look at the 5 segments of the lips. So those will be those 5 right here. So we're going to start with the one in the center, the most important. It is going to be called the upper lip break. So this is going to be shaped kind of like a heart, and it's always going to be sticking out a little bit more in comparison to the sides of the lips right here. So the sides of the upper lip. And below, we're going to have the lower lip split in half with the kind of like the crack in the center called the groove of the lower lip. So this is going to be present on almost everybody to some degree, so we can see it here and just how the highlights shift because there's a small dent right here. And here it's a little bit visible as well right there. And this one, not so much, but for most people, we'll be able to see it a little bit at least. And it's very, very visible in this case here for this one right there. And then we'll have this region up here, which is called the philtrum, the little cavity, not really cavity, but the little dip at right above the upper lip, right above the upper lip break. And finally, the other section that is worth mentioning are the pillars of the mouth, and that is going to be those things right here, those shapes right there. So as you can see, right below the lower lip, it digs in pretty deep here to meet the chin, to meet the upper part of the chin. But on the sides here, the slope is a little bit more relaxed. So in here, it's pretty intense. It goes like this. But on the side, it's a much softer curve. And this is going to be called the pillar of the mouth. So we'll have this more pronounced in men generally, but you'll see it right here. And the top of the chin is often going to help kind of limit or emphasize these pillars right here. All right, so that's it for the different regions of the mouth. Now let's take a look at how to simplify the lips as much as possible. To get ourselves ready, what we're going to do is I'm going to start on this one right here, and we're going to split this in thirds again, just like we did on this one right there. And what we're going to do, what we're going to add is this right here, this sphere for the mouth. So it is going to start, like I said, right here at the top of the chin, and it's going to end right about the center of the nose right here. So right about this line right there. So it doesn't have to be super precise, but what we want with this is to make sure that it is a nice round ball so that it sticks out a little bit. All right, and it will look something like this. So now the sphere gives us a number of things, a number of landmarks that are pretty important. So it is going to give us the pillars of the mouth. So we're going to have a starting point for this. So we know that it starts at the chin right here, but the sphere is also going to indicate kind of like the width of the pillars. So we know that those pillars could go something like this. And from the side view, it's also going to give us the angle of the mouth. So the mouth is not straight, like I said, it's a circle. So now we have a sphere. So I'm going to draw just like that in thirds. So very similar to what we did for the head right here. So I'm going to do the same thing for the sphere. And the lower portion right there, this is going to be kind of like the line for the mouth. So it's going to wrap around the sphere. And from the front view, well, it's not going to be that visible because it's the front view, so it's going to appear like a straight line, but from an angle like this, we would definitely see it. So that sphere right there, that's going to be the simplified mouth. So we're not gonna draw a box or anything like that for the mouth. That is going to be it. So it's going to be this sphere, and the line of the mouth is going to go on that sphere. And so the line should be something like this. So we're going to start with a straight line, at least from the front view, like this. In this case, well, it's just going to follow this line right there. So that would be the equivalent of the straight line from this angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to get back these different regions here, these different segments for the lip. So we know that the bottom lip is split in half. So we're going to have a little bit of a dent like this. And it's going to start, the lip is going to end, not start, it's going to end a little bit higher than the top of the chin. So right about there. And then it's going to be mostly straight. And then wrap up all the way to the sides like this. And then for the top of the lips, we're going to start them again kind of like at the halfway point between the center of the mouth, between the mouth opening and the nostrils. So right about in the center, right there. It can be higher, it can be lower, depending on how big the lips are. But a center point, something like this, maybe a little bit lower, would be perfect. So what we're going to do here is we're going to mimic that shape that we just did here, but up there, like this. So another curve up here, and this is going to indicate where the philtrum is, and that's just going to go back towards the nostril like this. And now what we can do with this is we can start to trace the little heart shape that for the upper lip break, and from there just connect the dot from the side of the mouth, the corner of the mouth right here, all the way to the top of the heart shape. And we would have some lips, essentially. So now we can erase kind of like the guides that we use for that. And we can add in a little bit of a curve. So at the side here, at the end, towards the corner of the mouth, the upper lip is always going to lay on top of it a little bit, just like that. So we'll have this nice curve like this. So for the front view, that'd be how you draw the lips. So then now what we're going to do is we're going to accentuate the pillars a little bit. So maybe soften them a little bit and make them a little bit lower, like this. Because the pillars are muscles, but also fat tissue. So you'll see those a little bit more visible in older people. And then the line for the chin right there is basically the opposite of the lips that we have right here. So it's going to be kind of like that. Then when it starts to curve up, then we're going to curve down instead. And then all of this here is going to be in the shades. It's not going to catch the light if the light's coming from the top. And it's going to be the same thing for the upper lip. So the upper lip is going to be in the same kind of angle as this portion here, right under the lower lip. We can see here. So if there's light coming from the top, this portion here is going to get lit. This portion here, which is the upper lip, is not going to get lit. The lower lip is going to get lit, but the bottom of the pillar is not going to get lit. So we have kind of like this staircase effect for light, and this means that we're going to get light here, we're not going to get light here. We're going to get light on the lip, on the lower lip, we're not going to get light on the upper lip. Or at least not much. So there we go. So now this indicates the volumes a lot better already. In the corner of the mouth right here, as we've seen in most cases here, we will have the lower lip kind of go in. So we'll go inside the shape like this, go in, while this top portion right there is going to lay on top because, again, of the node right here. So we have the lower lip going in and the node kind of coming on top of that. So what this gives us is, kind of a line like this. So it will be like this at the tip, at the end of the mouth. And then we'll have kind of like shadow on top here and light at the bottom here. So that's something that we can replicate here. So again, it curves down a little bit at the corner of the mouth, just like that. Alright, and then finally, we're going to do the same thing on this model right here. So again, we start by drawing kind of like the center right here. So the center of the sphere is not going to be this line right there. So that was the symmetry for the face. But now we drew a sphere on top. So what we're going to do is find the center for the sphere. And as you can imagine here, we have a smaller sphere like this in comparison to the big one that we used here. But since it's facing the same direction, we can use the same kind of oval that we had for this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to find kind of like the parallel like this. So that sphere is going to be parallel like this. And then from there, I am going to draw the same kind of ovals. So just try to copy what you have right there, and that's going to be what we use for the center. Right there. Make sure that we have a similar curve, so something like this, and something like this. Looks similar enough, works for me. Alright, so now that we have that, we're going to be able to place the center of the mouth, so the upper lip break, and also the groove of the lower lip right on that line, so like a little V like this. And then from there, we're going to do the same thing for the upper lip, so as the same V, but this is going to give us the philtrum. So there we go, now we can connect the line. And the philtrum just goes to the center of the nose right there. And now we can trace kind of like the upper lip. It's going to be something like this, all the way to the corner of the mouth. And the lower lip. So it's going to be a line parallel to the lines, the horizontal lines that we have for this character already. So that's going to be kind of like the line, the straight line that we have right here. And then it is going to go back up and touch at the corner of the mouth. So now we have a couple perspective issues with this mouth. So it's a good start. But as we can see here, if we look at it from the side here, there is a lot of overlapping going on. So we have the upper lip break here, creating some sort of perspective, and then we have this portion of the lip down here in front of this other portion back here, which is in front of the corner of the mouth already. So we have a lot of overlapping going on, so we need to apply that again in here as well. So we're going to have the upper lip portion, and then the upper lip is going to go behind that where it ends, like that. And then we still have the corner of the mouth to add in here that's going to go behind all of that. So now it's a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to erase all the stuff here. So I know that right about here I'm going to have the pillars for the mouth. So I can leave those in here. And the corner of the mouth, I'm going to go down like we've seen before. Okay, and now what would help in here is to add the same kind of shadows, same kind of shadow treatment that we did on here. So we're going to shade this whole thing here. That would be a pretty accurate mouth. So maybe we want to make that upper lip a little bit thinner in this case. Something like that might look a little bit better. And that is how you draw a mouth. So there's a couple of things here that we haven't really looked at. So what happens when we're looking at a mouth from the top of the head or from underneath? So the same will apply. So the sphere here will kind of make sure that we always include that curve of the lips. So if we're looking at a mouth, let's say from the top view, so all I'm going to draw right now is kind of like this sphere right here. And then we'll draw the mouth on let's say a sphere that's pointing down. So that line right here that I'm drawing right now, this is going to be the opening of the mouth. So I'm looking down on the mouth. So we're going to do essentially the same thing. So I'm going to create the little V right here. So I'm going to have the corner of the mouth right there. As you can see, I'm getting that nice curve. And that's going to go up to the nose. The nose is not there, but we can just imagine it. And now we'll have the lower lip following the curve for the sphere, and then have them come back and connect to the corner of the mouth, just like that. And we're going to do the same thing with the top of the mouth, so have the corners right here, and the corner of the philtrum, and go down and connect to the side of the mouth, to the corner of the mouth. There we go, so we would have a mouth in proper perspective. So now we can add a little bit of shading here for the upper lip, like we've been doing so far. And then next, I know that at the bottom of the sphere right there, this is also where kind of like the pillar is going to attach itself. So I'm going to go a little bit lower, maybe, like this on both sides, to give a little bit of room for the pillars to exist. And then maybe fade in the lower lip. And again, we want to represent that little curve right there. And in this case, you know, from the front, it seems like it's pointing down, but really what it's doing is actually pointing forward a little bit. So it's going to be, so there we go. So with that simple sphere, we're able to draw mouth in perspective. So that would be a top view. So we'd have kind of like the nose, maybe like this, with the nostrils right there, and the eyes right here looking down. So again, just make sure that you draw your sphere properly. Just make sure that you find the center of your sphere, you know, based on the sphere for the head that you created. You know, that sphere is always going to be lined up with the sphere for the head and with the ovals that you created for the sides of the head as well. So this is kind of how you find the center for this, and this is also how you find the horizontal split, so to be able to draw the opening of the mouth. And there you go. So with a simple sphere like this, it should allow you to draw mouth in pretty much any angle, any perspective. The last feature of the face, the last part of the face that we are going to take a look at is the eye, the window to the soul. One of the most important, in my opinion, one of the most, if not the most important part of the face. The eyes allow to convey all kinds of emotions. They are also what can make or break most of the characters. If the eyes look dead, the character will look dead. So it's also the first thing that you will see when you look at someone else, unless their face is covered. The eye is what we used to is the first contact that you make with most people. And just like with real life, it's also going to be the first thing that you see in most paintings. So if you have a character in a painting, the eye are going to have as much importance. So like the previous chapter, we're going to start with a look at the eye's anatomy. We've seen this in the visual communication, the first class on visual communication, but we'll take a quick look again, and then we'll also explore kind of the surrounding areas for the eye, so all the skin that wraps it up, the skin that contains it into its socket. And then from there, we'll take a look at how to simplify it, how to place it onto the face, how to properly place it so that it doesn't look weird, so that it looks like a real person, so that it looks like something that is believable, realistic-ish, something that will really finalize and complete the face that we have so far. So let's take a quick look at the eye anatomy. So here we have the eyeballs kind of placed within the eye socket, and we're going to take a quick look at the main components here. So we have the pupil, which is the hole inside the center of the eye that lets the light through all the way back to the cornea. And then we have the iris, which is the color of the eye, making the pupil bigger or smaller. And then finally we have the white of the eye, also called the sclera. Next we have the cornea, which is this lens-shaped soft transparent tissue sitting right on top of the iris. And this is going to be mostly invisible in most cases, except when it comes to the highlight that it will create on the eye. So we'll take a look at this a little bit later. Then moving on, we have the lower eyelid, right here. We have the upper eyelid and wrapping the upper portion of the eyeball. Then we have the tear duct, which is this little corner here, or you can also call that the corner of the eye. And we have the epicanthal fold, which is going to be this fold right here, wrapping, essentially laying on top of the upper eyelid. And the epicanthal fold, what's interesting with this is that sometimes, depending on your ethnicity or depending on your age, will wrap around the eye in different ways. So sometimes it won't cover the top eyelid at all, like in this case right here. Sometimes it will cover most of it or all of it, and you can have anything in between. So it might cover half, it might cover the 3/4. It really depends. But this will generally be influenced mostly by race and also by age. So the older you get, the more likely you are to have your epicanthal fold kind of lower a little bit to cover part of your upper eyelid and maybe also part of your eye. So as far as the important parts, the important areas of the anatomy that we wanted to take a look at, that's going to be pretty much it. Those are important mainly because they influence the shape and the shading and the color of the eye. Now if we take a closer look at the eyeball itself, so we have a cross section right here and cut in half. There's one little thing important to mention when it comes to drawing it and shading it, adding highlights and shadows to it. So in reality, the eye looks more like this. So you'll have the iris, which is going to be pretty much flat, maybe even curved outwards a little bit, so convex slightly. And then the shading that this would give us is something like this, so kind of a flat shading, so not that interesting. But what I prefer to do, and you will notice that also for a lot of different artists, is that we tend to push this inward, so make that iris shape concave instead. And as a result, let's say we have a light source that is coming from the top view like this. If this was the case, if it was flat, then all you would have is kind of an even distribution of lights across the flat surface. But when it is a curved surface now, well, the bottom of the curve is going to catch a little bit more of the light, and the upper section here is going to be covered, so shielded from the light, so it will be more in the shadow instead. So you get this nice highlight here. And of course, you would also have the highlight from the top portion right here, so you can always add a little bit of highlight around the opening of the pupil. And that would be true as well for this more realistic scenario. Now, this is it for the iris, but the cornea now also plays a role in shading, which is pretty important. As we know, the cornea is not invisible, but it's transparent, completely transparent. And this means that we're not going to see it, but we will definitely see the highlight that it creates. So in both cases here, in the more stylized version and the more realistic version, the cornea is not going to change. It's always going to be convex. So it's always going to stick out from the eyeball. And as you can see here, it doesn't even follow the curve of the eyeball. It actually sticks out a little bit more. And this is going to sometimes, actually often, play a role in the shape of the eye. So right now the eye is looking straight ahead, but if the eye was looking upwards maybe, so if it was looking something like this instead, then what might happen is that it might actually push this portion of the eyelid up a little bit, since it has a little bit of a bump to it. So maybe something more like that. So it might actually change the shape of the eye overall when the cornea pushes against the eyelids in different direction. So just something to consider. Now back here, what this would create, if we have the light coming from the top here, again, let's say we continue this line right here, we would have a highlight right at the top portion right there. So something like this. And the cornea catches the light, but you can almost think of it as a glass surface. So it doesn't catch just like a dot. This is a simplified version of a highlight for the cornea. It's actually just reflecting the entire environment. So if you have a lot of different light sources in your environment and in what you're looking at, well, in this case, and let's say you have a bunch of different lights, let's say you have 5 different lights, then those lights might all be reflected in the eye. And if they have a particular shape, so let's say there are a bunch of squares, then what you might see from up close are those squares, those same squares that are being reflected. So the shape of the highlight of the cornea is always going to be different depending on where your character is and what it's looking at. But in this case, to give the example of where the highlight would go, in this case, since this shape is convex, well, the highlight would go at the top. So right here, where the light would land first. So in this case, you would have a top highlight, and you would have a top highlight in this case as well. Given that there's a single light source, or at least a single dominant light source, the highlight of the cornea is always going to be opposite to the highlight of the iris. So in this case, if I change the light source, if I make it come from a different direction, if I make the light instead come from the side, so let's say the light is pointing in this direction, well, in this case, this area, the side of the iris is going to be catching the light, and this side of the cornea as well. As you can see, it still follows the same rule. Now moving on, let's take a look at the main shapes, the main shapes of the eye if we are going to draw it. So we're not going to take a look at the eyeball itself. Obviously, that's just a sphere. But what we want to be able to draw in this case, not eyeballs, it's the actual eye with the skin surrounding it, with the muscles surrounding it. So to do this, we can start from a ball. So this is going to be the eyeball, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw on top of this. Everything is going to land and wrap around on the surface. So what we can start with here is we're going to draw the top, the line defining the top eyelid. And that is going to be pretty much 3 different strokes. So you have the main stroke that stems from the corner of the eye here, or the tear duct. And then we'll have another line that is going to be mostly straight, maybe, and again, this depends greatly depending on the person, and also depending on where the eye is looking. As we remember, the cornea might affect the shape. Next, we'll have one more horizontal one at the top, and a third one to finish the line of the top eyelid, the upper eyelid. And then for the lower eyelid, we're going to have actually just 2. So one that goes like this, that's a little bit shorter, and then a longer one that will go and meet the tear duct. So the eyeball itself is always bigger than the opening that we see. So if we look at this eye right there, well, the eyeball is actually probably more like something like this. So about this shape, this size. And all we can see is this portion here because the rest is covered. So we're going to go with the same idea here. And then we'll have the iris in the center. The iris, in most cases, will often touch the top eyelid if looking straight, if a person is looking straight. In this case, we can see that a little bit more, where it cuts the iris more than the lower eyelid. And in this case as well, we have the nice circle right here, and at the top it's being cut. And then we'll add in the fold that would go around, that would wrap around the eye, like we can see right here. And again, in this case, if we have the epicanthal fold a little bit lower or covering the entire eye, well, that might change as well. But that fold, generally speaking, is going to go around the eye like this and kind of follow the same shape or a very similar shape. And now that we have this, well, the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid are going to be really, really easy to shade. We're going to follow the same shading as the sphere. So you can always imagine that everything surrounding the eye is going to be shaded just like the eyeball itself. So the lower eyelid would be shaded just this way. And then you would have maybe like the cheek that comes in and break that shape. So the rest of the face would be something like this, and then you have a nice smooth shading between. But the lower eyelid would still maintain a similar shape, a similar kind of shading. And so with the top, so you would have this portion here kind of going inside of the fold, and this portion coming out on top, the epicanthal fold laying on top of it all. But the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid are shaded just like a sphere, just like the eyeball itself. And then if we continue by looking at this one here, as we can also notice, the eyelids, both the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, actually have a thickness. So they're not paper thin, they're not resting right on the eyeball. There's actually a thickness right here that's really important to remember and to draw. Now, very much like the iris, where the lower portion here catches the light and the upper portion doesn't, at least in the stylized way that I explained. We'll have a similar effect with the eyelids. So the bottom eyelid is going to catch the light, since it's going to be, at least most of the time, when the light is coming from the top, which is a more common light setup. So you might always have light that's coming from the bottom if it's, if you're having a flashlight or something like that. But generally speaking, the light will be coming from the top in some fashion. And as a result, you'll have the lower portion of the iris, which is going to catch the light, and also the bottom eyelid, the lower eyelid, is going to catch the light as well. While the top one is going to be in the shade, because it's going to be facing a direction that's opposite from the light source, just like the top of the iris as well. So very similar. So if we try to simplify those volumes here, so we will have the portion here starting from the top, or starting from the center of the eyebrow. We'll have the epicanthal fold, kind of like folding all the way down and sometimes over the upper eyelid, and then you'll have the eyelid coming out again and then back in a straight line. So this line right here is going to be slightly curved to follow the curve of the eyeball. But then when the fold goes back in and touches the eyeball, this is going to be a straight line, and then you'll have the eyeball, a nice curve. And then again, a straight line out, and then again, a nice curve all the way down, following a similar curve as the one from the eyeball itself. Now, before we place the eyes on the face, one last thing that we need to remember is, and it has to do also with all the ellipses, all the ovals that we've drawn on the head, that we practice drawing. This is going to come in handy in this case as well, where the iris from the front, if the character is front facing, will appear circular, will appear like a perfect circle, just like the eyeball itself. But since this is a circle that moves on the surface, on a circular surface, on spherical surface of the eyeball, well, when it goes towards the sides, the side right here, the iris is not going to look like this. It's not going to maintain its shape, its round shape. So you wouldn't have this, for example, for an eye looking sideways. Instead, you would have a warped circle to adjust for the perspective. So something like this instead, with the iris in the center right there. And again, the iris, as we know, since it's more like from the side view here, it's more like a half a sphere, or like a cone, an inverted cone. Well, the eye is not going to be right in the center, and it's not going to be right on the outside here. It's actually going to go inside like this, as if it's a funnel going with the lights coming in like this, being funneled into the pupil. And then that effect is going to be even more pronounced when we look at it from the side completely. So the iris itself might become really, really, really flat, and we might not even be able to see the pupil, since it might just be recessed inside of the shape too much for us to see it. And of course, this is going to work in every direction. So if the eyeball rotates up or rotates down, the same is going to apply here. All right, let's end with placing the sphere and the eyelids and everything around the eye onto the face. So where does it go? We've seen briefly when drawing the nose that we can come up with the placement of the eyes when we have the nose drawn in. So removing all of this here, so starting fresh like this, there's a couple ways that we can approach this. So let's say we can start with the eyes, or we can start with the nose. So if you found out where the nose is, well, all you can do is take the nostrils and kind of go all the way up, and then take that same distance and apply it on both sides, and you should find the placement for your eyes, at least horizontally. And then as far as the placement for the eyes vertically, so we'll have the eyebrow line, then we'll have the bottom of the eye socket, and then the tip of the nose, or the nostrils, the line of the nostrils, and it's going to land right in between the eyebrows, the eyebrow line, and the bottom of the eye socket. So it's going to be right about here. And then we make that same distance on both sides. Then this should give us the region right here where the eyes are going to land. And of course, to figure out where this area is, you can also do it without the nose. This is just easier if you have the nose in there already. But if you don't, well, we can still do the same process. So you take this whole width of the forehead, you split it in quarters, so in half and then in half again. And then this is going to give us, as you can see, and we just go down until we meet that line and then this is where the eyes are going to land, so right there. So when drawing the eyes, the couple things that we'll want to pay attention to is the overall shape, like we've seen before. So the top of the eye is going to be 3 different lines, and actually the corner of the eye is not really at the center of the eye. So if we look at it from the front again, you have the corner of the eye that's right here, and if we trace a straight line, as you can see, it's pretty low compared to the pupil, which should be at the center of the eyeball. So what this is going to give us, and if I trace it again also, we can see the separation between the lower portion of what we see of the eyeball compared to the top portion. So all of this to say that the corner of the eye is going to land lower than this line right here that we found. So this line represents kind of like the halfway point of the eye. So if we split the eye in half, like this, but in this case, the corner of the eye is a little bit lower. So we're going to start that lower right here instead of right on the line. And then we remember it's going to be 3 different lines. So first one, second one, and second one is going to start dropping a little bit. And then the last one is going to land a little bit higher than the corner of the eye, but not much. Something like this. And then we can add the third line and the last one meeting at the corner of the eye. So we'll have this shape. Now with this, since we still have this line right here, this line is going to represent the position of the eyeball itself. So right now what we drew is just the outside of it, the eyelids. But this line we'll use to give us the position of the eyeball. So it's going to land right in the center. And we'll be able to draw the iris again right in the center. So now we can erase kind of like the top portion here. That is going to be covered by the upper eyelid. And we would have an eye placed in the right position. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So if we take this, we can verify that the eyes are a proper size by just making sure that the size of the eye here, right in between the 2 eyes, there's also the size of another eye. And this should give us a pretty good indication that the eyes that we have are at a normal size. Sometimes you might be tempted to make the eyes a little bit bigger than they should be, and sometimes a little bit smaller, but this way, this should be pretty accurate all the time. Now that I see that the corner of the eye is actually stretching a little bit past the guides that I have, I'm going to shrink those down just a little bit. Alright, that's more like it. And then of course we're not done, so now we can add in all the other stuff. So we're going to start with the upper eyelid. So with the line defining the upper eyelid, well, you have the shape instead of a perfect circle. So what you can see here, the eye itself is kind of like a tilted box, if you want to place it like this. So it's not a box that is just straight like this. Instead it's going to be a little bit tilted. So as far as the placement on the face, this would be it. So this is how you do it. This is where it goes. And then of course, there's a lot of stuff that goes after this. So if we bring back the face that we have already, so now what we can do is we can erase in here to give us something that's a little bit lighter, so we can see the eyeballs. But there you go. If the eyes alone looked a little bit weird, now with the rest of the face, as you can see, it fits right in. So there we have it. So now, of course, the shading looks a little bit strange, and of course, there's a lot of things in here that the shading would help. So if we apply kind of like the right shading for the right volumes that we're finding here, it would actually make the head look a little bit narrower, because right now it looks a little bit wide. But the shading alone could definitely help kind of get rid of that illusion. So there we go, with a little bit of shading already, the head doesn't look as wide. This would be the process. So now that we know how to place the eye on the front facing head, let's do the same but from the side. So like we've seen when drawing the nose and when drawing the lips, the eye socket acts like an umbrella or something to prevent things from debris or liquids from falling into the eye directly. And so as a result, the eyeball itself is going to be recessed inside of the skull quite a bit. And from the side view, it would look something like this. So you have, if we exaggerate it, we'll have the forehead, and then we'll have the eye socket going in, and then out again. And then the eyeball itself is going to land right here. And then, of course, the eyeball is not just laying there. Now we could add the eyelid. So the upper eyelid is going to wrap around, especially from the side. It's going to be very visible that the eyeball is actually a sphere, because we'll see the eyelids following the same curve and then coming back in here. And then the bottom eyelid is going to be doing the same thing, but for the lower portion of the eye. And one thing that's good to notice here is the upper eyelid is going to be further out than the lower eyelid. So if you see this line here, they're not at the same level. And this example here also shows that the eyelid itself has some thickness. All right, and then finally, what we're going to do is add the eyes back onto this drawing here. So just like we did for the front version, we're going to find out where the half of this portion here, from here all the way to the other side is, and then split that in half and then in quarters to find where the eye is going to be. This gives us something like this. So that would be this line right there would be where the eye would placed in. So, and if we do the same thing on the other side, so the eye would end right there and would start about here. So I'm going to do in here, I'm going to just paint in white, so it's going to be a little bit easier. So corner of the eye, again, begins a little bit lower than this particular line. In this case here, depending on the size of the nose and the angle of the head, you might not be able to see the corner of the eye. As we can see here, because of the size of the nose, it's going to be hidden a little bit behind the nose. So it would land right here, meaning that we're not going to be able to see it in this case. So just imagine it, or you can actually draw it, but know that we're not going to see it in the end. Then the first line that goes up, second line that goes across horizontally, and the last line that finishes again below that original line. Next we'll have the first line for the lower eyelids and meeting and the tear duct corner of the eye, just like that. So that would be the shape of the eye. And then on the other side, we're going to do the same thing. So starting from here, up, going up slightly, finishing right there, and then again, first straight line, another straight line going back to the corner of the eye. There we go. Now, of course, we want to add the eyelids to this, so let's do the outline this to limit that shape, to define that shape a little bit better. And then right at the corner of the eye here, the eye is going to be actually round. We have the corner of the eye like this. All right, and then now we can add a little bit of thickness for the eyelid. So right now there's no thickness whatsoever. It's as if they land right. It's as if they share the same surface as the surface of the eyeball. So we're going to add a little bit of thickness. And then from this perspective, since we're looking at this head from a lower vantage point, from a lower perspective, we're going to be able to see the upper eyelid more than we can see the lower eyelid, just because it's going to be higher, and the perspective is going to be more intense, more visible for that part. So the lower part of the eyelid is going to be a little bit more visible. Same thing with this side here, so maybe something like this. And then we might still be able to see a little bit of the bottom eyelid accordingly. To shade that, add a little bit more shading to the upper eyelid because it's not receiving as much light as the lower eyelid. The lower eyelid is going to be a little bit brighter as it catches more of the light. And then we can add the folds for the eyelid and reinforce those. All right, now we can add the fold for the upper eyelid. So we're going to start a little bit above that and kind of follow the same shape. Go maybe a little bit higher as we get towards the side of the head, and then down, just like that. And then we can do something similar at the bottom, the lower eyelid. Again, following kind of the shape of the eyeball itself. Then let's adjust the shading for that stuff. So at the bottom here, it's as if we're shading the bottom of a sphere, so it's going to receive a little bit less light. The top is going to receive more light, so the top eyelid right here is going to receive a little bit more light because it's facing the light source more directly. All right, and then finally, I can just adjust the shading for the epicanthal fold. And if we just take a look at what we have right here, we can see that the epicanthal is essentially going around the eye socket. So it's going to have this shape here, like this. So this means that we're going to shade it just as if this was kind of like a cylinder going across like this, right? So if we're shading a cylinder, the bottom of the cylinder is going to receive less light, and the top is going to receive more light, and then we'll have a nice gradient in between, so something like that. So we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So we're going to consider that this right here is the side of the cylinder, and then we have the cylinder going across right there, right above the upper eyelid. And so we are going to shade this shape in the same way. So the top of the cylinder here is going to get a little bit more light, and less as we transition to the bottom portion of the cylinder. In this case, it looks something like this. And of course, there's no end to the cylinder, so we can just blend it with the side of the head like this. And then we can do the same thing on the other side, as if we're shading a cylinder. Alright, so something like that. And of course, this line doesn't belong there anymore. So there we go. So this is kind of how you would place an eye on a head in perspective. And then we're not going to focus too much on shading. I just wanted to do it a little bit so that we know kind of like what to look for. Of course, from here we can finish the shading properly. So there we go. So it would be something like this. So of course, this is done quickly, but you get the idea, and it works. It's placed in the right position. It's placed in the correct angle. So this is going to wrap this chapter on drawing the eye. Next, we'll take a look at all those features combined and everything else in between that we haven't taken a look at just yet. I'll see you then. In this final chapter of the anatomy of the head, we are going to cover all the different features of the face that affect the overall surface of the face the most. And this is going to be split in 3 different parts. And so we are going to go from the inside out. So we're going to start with the bones, the major bones that really affect the silhouette of the face. And then we're going to take a look at the muscles and then the fat. And we'll finally wrap this up with a quick demo of a drawing of the head from start to finish to see everything that we've learned so far applied on an actual drawing. So besides the main features that we've seen, so like the nose, the ears, the mouth, and the eyes, there are still some very important areas of the face that we haven't yet covered that really affect the overall shape. And so like I said, we're going to start with the bones. And in this case, I am going to start with these, the kind of like the basic shapes that we already had. So if we remember, for the mouth, we had a ball. So the mouth always started with a ball that starts here at the top of the chin and goes something like this. And so we are going to start in the same way when approaching kind of like a simplification of the entire head. So right now, what we have right here, this is very simple, right? It's like a sphere, a complicated sphere is what I would describe this. And in reality, the face has a lot more change in volumes and change in different planes. So this is what we are trying to look at right now. So the first thing that we'll do is, like I said, draw the ball. So this is going to be the ball, and I'm drawing simple shapes because this is going to help us in shading the actual face properly. So everything here can be shaded like a ball. So the bottom here is kind of like the bottom of the ball, the top here is the top of the ball, and then of course we'll have kind of like the smaller details inside for the mouth and all these other things. But overall, this is going to be kind of like a really good simplification of the area surrounding the mouth. Now, if we continue simplifying the shape of the shape of the skull, so looking at this right here, we can see there's a couple things that are kind of sticking out of the shape. So we have here kind of like the bones, the zygomatic bones that are right below the eye socket and that are pretty pronounced in most cases. So this is going to really indicate kind of like the location of your cheek, and as you touch your own face, you can definitely feel them right below your eye socket. So they are a pretty important landmark in the face. And then the other one is going to be the cheekbones. So the bones here, the corner of the mandible, which is this portion of the skeleton. And then finally, we'll have kind of like the little grooves at the top here that we can see, edges on the sides here of the frontal bone. So They're not really visible in this front image, but if we look at them from the side here, we can clearly see a change in lighting. So this curve right here is what I'm talking about. So this is going to affect the shading quite a bit. So as we can see here, the top here will get more light. It's as if it's a box. So you can draw a box like this. So you can think of it this way. And then depending on the person, this is going to be more or less pronounced. So taking those into consideration, we can simplify the skull a little bit more. So those are all the same shapes that you can find on the skull. I've just kind of accentuated them. So instead of having kind of like a soft curve going from the top of the side of the ball here to here and then moving on to the side, and instead of having kind of like this line come up and then into the eye socket, instead we're simplifying things. We're just making everything really, really boxy so that it's easy to see how the shading affects the different volumes. And as you can see here, I'm building up on the ball that we drew initially. So we would have something like this, and then as far as the nose and the eye socket, this is nothing new. This is what we've been looking at so far when drawing the nose, drawing the eyes and the eyebrows. So nothing new here. And then we have the mouth here, so we can definitely, add in the mouth. We know how to do that now. There you go. And then we have the mouth. Really, really simple once we have that sphere. And now, as far as the bones are involved, this would be pretty much it. So those are the big landmarks. So we can take a look at them again. So we have the zygomatic bone here, which is the cheekbone. And then we have the frontal bone, which is going to be the front portion of the head, and the little grooves here. Forming, stemming from the eye socket, the side of the eye socket right here, and then into that curve right there, kind of like following the curve of the top of the skull. And then we'll have the corner of the mandible, so the jawbone right there, which is going to give a distinct shape to the head. And this will be more or less pronounced depending on your sex and depending on the person. So as far as the bones are concerned, those are going to be the only ones that we really want to pay attention to. Moving on, we're going to add a layer of muscle. So right now there's a couple problems here, which is why we need the muscles in there, and not that many muscles actually. There's only two group of muscles that are really important for the silhouette of the face. And the reason why I want to add the muscles now is because if I were to shade this and like soften all the shapes here, we would have some like holes right here, as you can see here, between the ball and the side of the mandibles I can actually see through. So we want to fill this area up, and of course this angle right here is pretty intense. So what I want to do is I want to soften this. And if we remember what we've seen before here, and I'm going to pop this up to make it a little bit more visible. But as we remember, we have those two muscles here, which are called the zygomatic muscles, are going to be affecting the surface of the face. So this is going to soften that sphere, soften that connection between the zygomatic bone and the rest of the mouth sphere. So if we remove this, as you can see now, by adding those zygomatic muscles, now I get a nice connection between the sphere and that side, that face right there. So now it's a lot softer. And what else? If I hide it and show it again, well, we can see now that we also added this area here, so the jaw. And the jaw muscle is called the masseter. So the masseter muscle is going to be attached here at the corner of the mandible and along the side of it, and is going to go all the way up and attach itself to the zygomatic arc, which is again the zygomatic here. This is the frontal part of it, and then the arc where it goes back towards the ear is going to be called the arc. And the masseter is going to attach to that, with the zygomatic muscles kind of laying on top of that. And the masseter is the one that really gives the shape to the jaw. So it's going to be very pronounced in some cases. So for men that are really muscular, or like men on steroids, you're going to notice this muscle here because it's a pretty big muscle. So if it gets worked out a lot, or if somebody's like chews a lot for some reason, this muscle is going to develop quite a bit, and then you'll see it stick out even more in some cases. And this is also kind of like the muscle that you can exaggerate if you want to draw a cartoon character of someone that's really, really buff, like make the jaw muscle like really, really big. So that would be that one right there. And then, like I said, the zygomatic muscle is just to soften the connection between the cheekbones, or the zygomatic bone, and the sphere for the mouth. So with that, with the addition of those muscles here, we've pretty much filled the hole that we had before right here, and also I added the ear so that it looks a little bit more like a head. So now we've filled in the holes, and we have a much better transition between the mouth area, so the sphere, to the cheekbones. And well, now the only thing that is left really would be to add the fat layer. So the muscles on the face are not going to change the overall shape of the head as much. So it's going to be mostly the scalp, mostly the skull that does the trick. The muscles will affect a little bit, like we've just seen, but most of the shape is going to be directed by the skull, as opposed to the rest of the body, where you have kind of like your legs, which are very simple in terms of the shape of the shape of the bones, and just pretty much just like sticks. And what really gives the volume to the legs and the arms is really going to be the muscles, but not so much when it comes for the head. So what is going to affect the head quite a bit, like I said, is the skull, but the fat also. And the fat is going to play a bigger and bigger role as the person ages, or if the person is just fatter. So this is going to be affecting the face quite a bit. Now, the layer of fat on the face is comprised on a bunch of compartments, and those are going to be all of these that we can see right there. All of these are going to be the ones that we want to pay attention to. So in reality, the head or the face has some more than this, so I'm ignoring quite a bit, and I'm simplifying some of them. So around the eyes, there's actually, where you see the split here, this indicates 3 different regions instead of a big one like I've drawn it. But when it comes to drawing the face, and when it comes to all the big shapes, the big fat compartments that are going to really affect the silhouette of the face and the volumes, this is going to be it. So let's take a look at them in some more detail. So this is going to seem a little bit scary, but like everything else, once you're familiar with them, it really makes a lot more sense when you look at people, when you look at, maybe like older people and how their face is deformed compared to when they were younger, or when you look at people that have more body fat, especially in their face, how the fat is distributed is all based on this. So it's not going to be random, and if you want to make somebody fat, somebody look fat, or somebody look older, those are all things that you really need to know. Starting from the top here, around the eye, and this is going to be enclosed in the eye socket, so to protect the eyeball, and those are going to be 2 big fat pads here. So we'll have the superior orbital fat at the top and the inferior orbital fat at the bottom. And like I've mentioned briefly, this line right there. This is going to be the line separating this and actually 2 smaller portions. We're not going to look at those individually because it really doesn't affect the silhouette much, or it doesn't affect much at all when we're drawing it or painting it. This is going to be more. This is going to be knowledge that's more important for like doctors if you do facial surgery and things like that. In our cases, just knowing that there's a fat pad at the top and the bottom of the eyeball is going to be plenty information, plenty enough. Moving down, we have all the cheek fat. So all the cheek fat pads, we are going to have kind of like this triangle shape right under the inferior orbital fat, which is going to be called the medial cheek fat. Then we have right to the side of the face the middle cheek fat, and all the way to the side the lateral cheek fat. We can take a look here what it looks like from the side. So this is going to be by far the biggest group of fat pads once you combine them all. From the front it doesn't look like that, but from the side view here you can see that it actually occupies quite a big portion of the face. And those are going to be some of the most visible when you age. Now moving down, we'll have the superior and inferior jowl fat. So this is going to be those 2 little balls right there. They're not really balls, but those 2 little compartments here. Again, this is not going to be visible unless you're old. And then at the bottom here, this is going to explain also why somebody has a kind of like a double chin. So this is going to be the premental and the submental fat. So we'll have kind of like the chin part here, the rounder shape, laying right onto the chin, and that's going to maintain its shape if you get really, really fat. But what will expand, so normally you'll have kind of like a square chin like this, and you would have that premental fat right there. Underneath this area right here would be where the submental fat will accumulate, or where the submental fat compartment will expand. And this is going to give you that double chin look. If you look at it from the front, you would have your mouth right here. So that would be kind of like your neck fat right there. And this can get quite big. Now, there's one more that we haven't seen yet, and this is going to be the nasolabial fat, and this is going to be that one right here, starting kind of like at the top of your nostril and then going down towards the corner of your mouth. And that one is going to be important, especially because it also indicates kind of the nasolabial line, which is going to be this red line right here. If you look at this nice gentleman right here, this is going to be that famous line here that almost everybody has, and that you'll definitely find on people that are older. So those are going to be all the different fat pads that are going to really influence the face of a person. One thing that's important to know when it comes to those fat pads is that when you're younger, they're going to be really full. So they're going to all touch each other, and it'll look like almost like a single shape, a single pad. But as you get older, as age takes its toll, those fat pads are actually going to shrink a little bit. So they'll shrink and they'll drop quite a bit. So this is going to mean that the separation between the fat pads suddenly is going to be more visible. So all that black here is going to be kind of a hole now, especially when they drop and when the skin loses its elasticity and when they can't kind of support the fat quite as well as before. So when those are all shrinking and dropping, this is when you'll start to see the sign of aging, like we can see on this sculpture. So that would cover pretty much all the different things affecting the shape of the face that we hadn't seen yet. And this would be all. So I know there's a lot of stuff in here, but when you consider all of these things as different layers, so you start with like the bones, make sure that your face has proper bone structure, and then you move on to look at the muscles or think about the muscles and make sure that the masseter are in their proper spots, and that you have the zygomatic muscles kind of there, filling up the hole. And then, of course, thinking of all those fat pads, you should have everything you need to be able to paint some really cool heads. So once you have this, and once you have all the volumes with this, well, all that's left is just softening everything. So what you can do is just, instead of having all those sharp edges, those sharp angles, you can just start to smudge or blend all those shapes together to give you a nice smooth surface. And it's already starting to look much better now. So this will be the process. And now let's take a look at some extra kind of landmarks on the face that are signs of aging, but also not necessarily, but just important lines and important bumps in the face that have a name that you should probably be aware of. So I'm going to take this sculpt here again, and there's going to be a number of folds in here that have particular names and that are also like straight up created because of those fat pads that we've just talked about. So they are quite relevant. Looking at this here, we can see a lot of the fat pads in action. So let's take a look at the premental fat right here. So we have a nice ball here. This person doesn't really have any volume to its submental fat pad, which indicates that he's not too fat. But then moving up, we have the nasolabial fold, like we've just mentioned, which is this red line right here, stemming from the corner of the nostril and all the way down to the corner of the mouth almost. And right underneath, so almost parallel to it, we'll have the marionette line, which is a line that starts from the corner of the mouth like this and will go all the way down the chin like this. And this becomes really, really pronounced when you're older. Then moving up, we'll have the mid-cheek groove, which is going to separate the nasolabial fat pad and the middle cheek, the medial cheek pad. So we'll have the nasolabial fat pad right here, and as we can see here, the triangle one, the medial cheek pad, which is going to be right here. So very visible in this case. And that line here is going to separate the two and become more and more pronounced as you get older, and as those fat pads start to shrink and drop. Now, that medial cheek fat pad is also going to create kind of like a small bump here, right on the cheek, and this is going to be called the malar mound. It will be caused by this portion right here and part of the rest of the cheek fat. So right behind here, kind of hidden, we would have the middle cheek fat, and all the way in the back right here that we can't really see anymore, but towards the side of the face, we would have the lateral cheek fat. So again, kind of well defined on this particular person. Now, of course, right below the eyelids, we will have the inferior orbital fat right here. And this fat patty here is going to create a groove that is called the palpebral malar groove. And it's going to be limit kind of the pocket of your eye. So this is going to be a pretty important line, once again, that a lot of people will have. And then right below that, just like with the malar mound right here, so we have a groove and then a mound. We'll have the palpebral malar groove right here, and then the lower lid bulge, which is what a lot of people refer to as the pocket under your eyes. And then finally, we'll have the last groove that is called the nasojugal groove, which is going to be the one separating kind of the corner of the eye right here and your nose. And that line right there can become quite apparent. And it's going to be very similar in the sense to the palpebral malar groove right here, so this one here. But in most cases, it's not going to join. They're not going to connect. So sometimes until you have the nasojugal groove kind of like going below it, something like that. So you'll have kind of like a double fold here. Or sometimes it'll be part of the same right here and kind of flow into the other one. So on this person, you can actually see these, jowl fat pads. So the superior and the inferior jowl fat pad right here and right here. So when it comes to facial features, we have pretty much covered everything now, at least everything that is relevant, everything that you'll see often and that will be useful when drawing. So a couple exercises that you should really conclude this first class on anatomy. I really wanted to make sure to spend an entire class on the head when it comes to the anatomy of it, because there's just so much there. The head is one of the most important part of the body, especially when drawing it. Sometimes people will dedicate paintings to it, so portraits. So it's very important that we take a look at all of this. I know there's a lot of content in here, but definitely practice this stuff. Do the same things that I've done so far. Draw the things on skulls. Try to simplify the volumes of the face. And, of course, practice drawing heads from imagination with the simplification tricks and tools that we've seen. I am going to leave you on a drawing of the full head now, applying all the knowledge that we've covered so far. And I'll see you in the next class.